Figure it out yourself. That's what my wife Stephanie yelled as she gunned the engine and left me standing in a gas station parking lot in Billings, Montana. 200 miles from home in Denver, her sisters Jessica and Vanessa laughing in the back seat like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. My name's John. I'm 34, work construction for North Peak Engineering, and I'd been married to Stephanie for 8 years. We'd driven up here for her cousin's wedding, supposed to be a weekend getaway. Just the four of us in her sedan, splitting gas money and hotel rooms. The whole ride up, something felt wrong. Stephanie kept exchanging looks with her sisters in the rearview mirror, little whispered conversations when they thought I wasn't listening. When I asked what was going on, she'd flash that smile and say, "Nothing, babe, just sister stuff." I should have trusted my gut. We'd stopped for gas an hour outside Billings. I went inside to grab coffee and use the restroom. When I came out, they were already in the car, engine running. Stephanie rolled down the window with this weird grin. "Get in the car, Stephanie," I said, walking toward the passenger door. "Actually," she said, "we've been talking, and we think you need to learn some independence." "What are you talking about?" Jessica leaned forward from the back seat. "You're always so clingy, John, following Stephanie around like a lost puppy." "We thought this would be good for you," Vanessa chimed in. "A little adventure." I stood there, car keys in my hand. Except they weren't car keys. They were house keys. My truck was back home in Denver, parked in our driveway. "This isn't funny," I said. "Whatever joke this is, cut it out." Stephanie's smile got wider. "It's not a joke, it's a prank. You're always so serious, John. Learn to laugh a little." "Figure it out yourself," she yelled, and hit the gas. I watched their taillights disappear down Highway 2, standing there with my wallet, my phone, and a growing realization that my wife and her sisters had just abandoned me in the middle of nowhere. The October wind cut through my jacket and I could smell snow coming. I called Stephanie's phone, straight to voicemail. I called Jessica's number. Same thing. Vanessa had blocked my number months ago after some argument I couldn't even remember. That's when I knew this wasn't some stupid prank that would end in an hour. This was something else entirely. Something that showed me exactly what my wife and her sisters thought of me. I walked back into the gas station and asked the clerk how much a bus ticket to Denver cost. "No buses run through here," he said. "Greyhound stops in Billings, though, about 40 miles east." I'd met Stephanie 9 years earlier at a job site. She was doing environmental consulting for a commercial project my crew was working on. Smart, funny, with this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room when she talked to me. Her sisters were different. Jessica was 2 years older, worked in marketing for some tech company, always had opinions about everything. Vanessa was the baby, 28, still figuring out what she wanted to do with her life but never short on attitude. From the beginning, they treated me like I was taking their sister away from them. Family dinners where they'd make inside jokes I couldn't follow. Vacations where they'd book activities without asking if I wanted to join. Small things that added up over time. "They're just protective," Stephanie would say whenever I brought it up. "They'll warm up to you." But they never did. If anything, they got worse after we got married. Jessica started making comments about how I held Stephanie back from traveling more, from taking risks. Vanessa would roll her eyes whenever I offered to help with anything, like changing a tire or fixing something around their apartments. "Not everything needs a man to solve it," she'd say. I started noticing other things too. How Stephanie would text constantly when we were together, always with her sisters. How she'd change plans at the last minute because Jessica or Vanessa had some crisis that needed immediate attention. Last year, Stephanie forgot our anniversary because she was helping Vanessa move apartments. The year before that, she missed my birthday dinner because Jessica was having problems with her boyfriend. "Family comes first," she'd always say. And I got that. I respected it, but I was supposed to be family too. The warning signs were there during the drive to Montana. How they'd insisted I didn't need to bring my truck because we'd all ride together. How Stephanie had booked the hotel room under her name only. How Jessica kept making jokes about how I never did anything spontaneous. "Remember when you used to be fun?" Vanessa had asked from the back seat. Before you got all domestic and boring? I'd laughed it off, but it stung. I worked 60-hour weeks to keep us comfortable. I fixed things around the house, planned vacations, remembered important dates. I thought that was what being a good husband meant. Standing in that gas station parking lot, watching the sun set over the Montana hills, I realized I'd been wrong. Not about being a good husband, but about who I was married to. The clerk inside let me use the station's landline to call a taxi company in Billings. $60 ride I couldn't really afford, but I needed to get to that bus station. The bus ride to Denver took 14 hours. 14 hours to sit in that uncomfortable seat and think about my marriage, about the woman I'd spent 8 years trying to make happy. I kept checking my phone, expecting an apology text. Maybe a panicked call when they realized they'd gone too far. But nothing came. Around midnight, somewhere outside Casper, Wyoming, it hit me. This wasn't about teaching me independence or helping me loosen up. This was about humiliation. About showing me exactly where I stood in their little sisterhood. I thought about all the times I'd given in when they wanted to change our plans, all the times I'd bitten my tongue when they made jokes at my expense, all the times I'd apologized for things that weren't my fault, just to keep the peace. The worst part wasn't being abandoned. The worst part was realizing this was probably something they'd planned for weeks, maybe months. Sitting around Jessica's apartment, cooking up this scheme, laughing about how clueless I was. By the time the bus pulled into Denver at 8 a.m., I'd made my decision. I took a cab home, expecting to find Stephanie's car in the driveway. But it wasn't there. The house was empty, exactly like we'd left it Friday morning. I sat at the kitchen table and called in sick to work. Then I did something I'd never done before. I started going through Stephanie's things, not because I was jealous or suspicious, but because I needed to understand who I'd been married to. Her laptop was password protected, but she'd always been careless about closing browser tabs. I found group chats between her and her sisters going back months, screenshots of our text conversations that she'd shared with them, complete with laughing emojis, photos of me sleeping that she'd sent them with captions like, "dead to the world as usual," and "zero awareness." But it was the thread about the Montana trip that broke something inside me. Jessica had suggested it first. We should totally ditch him somewhere and see how long it takes him to figure out how to get home. Vanessa. OMG, yes. He's so dependent on Steph for everything. Stephanie. You guys are terrible, but also, it would be hilarious. They'd planned every detail. The gas station stop, the story about needing independence, even the backup plan if I somehow made it home before them. He'll probably just call his mom or something, Jessica had written. Big baby. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long time. Then I went upstairs, packed a bag, and left. I didn't leave a note. I didn't turn off the utilities or lock the door. I just walked out the same way they'd driven away from me. The difference was I wasn't coming back. I drove my truck to my brother Kevin's place in Colorado Springs. He worked nights at a manufacturing plant and had a spare room in his apartment. When I showed up at his door with a duffel bag and no explanation, he just nodded and handed me a beer. "How long you staying?" he asked. "Don't know yet." Kevin had never liked Stephanie. He'd never said it outright, but I could tell. The way he'd get quiet when she was around. How he'd always have some excuse to leave early when we had family gatherings. I told him what happened. All of it. The prank, the group chats, the months of planning behind my back. "Jesus, John," he said when I finished. "You're better off without her." Monday morning, I called my supervisor at North Peak and requested a transfer to a project in Colorado Springs. We'd been short-handed on a hospital renovation and they needed experienced guys. My boss didn't ask questions, just said I could start Wednesday. Tuesday afternoon, my phone started ringing. Stephanie was back. I let it go to voicemail. Then listened to the message. "John, where are you? I come home and you're just gone? That's not like you. Call me back. We need to talk about this." No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just confusion that I'd had the nerve to disappear on her. I blocked her number. An hour later, Jessica called. I blocked her too. Then Vanessa. Blocked. But they were clever. They started calling from other numbers. Stephanie's work phone. Numbers I didn't recognize. Always the same message. I was overreacting. It was just a joke. I needed to come home so we could work this out. Thursday, Kevin came home from his shift with a weird look on his face. "Your wife's here," he said. "She's sitting in her car outside." I looked out the window. There was Stephanie's sedan parked across the street. She saw me in the window and got out, walking toward the apartment building. I met her in the lobby before she could knock on Kevin's door. "John, thank God," she said, reaching for me. "I've been so worried." I stepped back. "What do you want, Stephanie?" "I want you to come home. I want us to talk about this like adults." "Talk about what? How you abandoned me 200 miles from home? How you and your sisters planned it for months?" Her face changed. The concerned wife act dropped for just a second, and I saw something else underneath. Irritation, like I was being unreasonable. "It was a prank, John." "You're acting like we committed a crime. You left me stranded, you laughed about it, you planned it for months." "Because you needed it," she said. And there it was. The real reason. "You're so dependent, so clingy. We thought if you had to figure something out on your own for once, maybe you'd grow up a little." The lobby was quiet except for the fluorescent lights humming overhead. I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 8 years and realized I didn't know her at all. "I'm not coming home," I said. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't just disappear because your feelings got hurt. Watch me." I turned and walked back to the elevator. She followed, talking faster now, making promises, threats, explanations that didn't make sense, but I stopped listening. When the elevator doors closed, she was still talking. Friday morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Jessica. Stephanie's really upset. You need to fix this." I showed it to Kevin over coffee. "Change your number," he said. So I did. 3 weeks later, I was settling into my new routine. Work at the hospital site during the day, helping Kevin with his truck on weekends, learning what it felt like to make decisions without checking with someone first. I'd found a small apartment on the south side of Colorado Springs. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No shared decisions about furniture or paint colors. No compromise on which shows to watch or what to have for dinner. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. That's when my mother called. "John, honey." Stephanie came by the house. I'd been avoiding my parents' calls, not ready to explain the separation yet. But apparently Stephanie had no such hesitation. "What did she tell you?" I asked. "She said you're having some kind of breakdown, that you disappeared after a family trip and won't answer her calls." I could hear the worry in my mother's voice. Mom had always liked Stephanie, thought she was good for me. Stable, responsible. "It's not a breakdown, Mom. We're having problems." "What kind of problems that can't be worked out?" I didn't want to get into details. Didn't want to explain the group chats or the planning or the months of subtle cruelty that had led up to that moment in Montana. It would sound petty, like I was overreacting to a joke. "I'll call you later, Mom. I need to think about some things." But after I hung up, I realized Stephanie was still playing the game, still controlling the narrative, making me look like the unstable one, the one who'd abandoned his marriage over nothing. I drove back to Denver that weekend. Not to the house Stephanie and I had shared, but to my buddy Marcus's place. He worked construction too, had been at my wedding. "Heard you and Stephanie split up," he said when I showed up at his door. "Sorry, man. What did you hear?" "Just that you took off after some fight." She seemed pretty torn up about it. There it was again, Stephanie's version of events, where I was the bad guy who'd overreacted and abandoned his wife. Marcus offered me a beer and we sat on his back porch. I told him the real story, all of it. "That's messed up," he said when I finished. "Why would she do something like that?" "I think she wanted me gone," I said. "Not permanently, but I think she liked having the power to hurt me, to show me how little I mattered." Marcus was quiet for a while. Then, "You know what I remember about your wedding?" I shook my head. During the reception, you were talking to some of my crew guys. Just normal conversation. But every time you'd laugh or seem like you were enjoying yourself, Stephanie would come over and interrupt. Find some reason you needed to be somewhere else. I remembered that. How she'd kept pulling me away from conversations, saying we needed to thank this relative or take photos with that group. I thought she was just being a good hostess, I said. Maybe. Or maybe she didn't like seeing you happy without her. That night, I drove past the house where Stephanie and I had lived. Her car was in the driveway, lights on in the living room. I could see her shadow moving around inside. I didn't stop. Didn't slow down. Just drove past and kept going. But seeing that house, remembering the life I'd built there, made me realize something important. I wasn't just running away from a bad marriage. I was running toward something better. Over the next few months, I started taking steps I should have taken years ago. I opened my own bank account, transferred my half of our savings, found a lawyer who specialized in divorce cases. The lawyer, a straightforward woman named Patricia Coleman, listened to my story without judgment. "Do you have documentation of the harassment?" she asked. I showed her the blocked numbers on my phone, the messages from Jessica and Vanessa, the way they'd been calling my workplace. "And you said she went to your parents' house?" "Yeah. Told them I was having a breakdown." Patricia made notes on her legal pad. "We can work with this. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, but the harassment could be relevant for other purposes." I signed the papers that afternoon. Patricia would handle serving Stephanie and starting the proceedings. "One more thing," she said as I was leaving. "Don't engage with any contact attempts. Don't respond to calls, texts, or in-person visits. Anything you say can be used to paint you as unstable or vindictive. What if she shows up at my work? Document it. Call the police if necessary, but don't engage." The hospital renovation project was going well. I'd been promoted to crew leader, supervising a team of 5 guys. The work was steady, the pay was decent, and nobody cared about my personal life as long as I showed up and did my job. I started taking evening classes at the community college. Business management, something I'd always been interested in, but never had time for when Stephanie and her sisters were constantly demanding attention. For the first time in years, I had space to think, to figure out what I actually wanted instead of just reacting to what other people expected. 2 months after I'd filed for divorce, Kevin called me at work. "That lawyer of yours wants to talk to you. Says it's important." I met Patricia at her office that afternoon. She had a stack of papers on her desk and a satisfied look on her face. "Your wife's been busy," she said. "She hired her own attorney and they're trying to claim abandonment. Says you left without warning and refuses to participate in marriage counseling." "Abandonment?" "It's a stretch, but they're arguing that your leaving was deliberate and vindictive. They want to contest the division of assets." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Even now, even after everything, Stephanie was trying to control the situation. "But here's the interesting part," Patricia continued. "I had an investigator do some digging. Your wife's been telling people that you became abusive and she had to escape for her safety." "That's a lie." "I know, and I can prove it. The investigator found social media posts from the weekend you were abandoned. Photos of your wife and her sisters celebrating at some bar in Billings. Captions about girls' weekend and freedom. She showed me printouts of Instagram posts. Stephanie and her sisters raising shot glasses, huge smiles, posted at 11 p.m. the same day they'd left me at that gas station. "This destroys their narrative," Patricia said. "They can't claim they were afraid of you while simultaneously celebrating your absence." I stared at the photos. In one of them, Jessica was wearing my Denver Broncos cap, the one I'd left in the car when I went into the gas station. "There's more," Patricia said. "The investigator also found the group chat messages. Your wife was careless about her privacy settings." She handed me another stack of papers. Screenshots of the conversations I'd seen on Stephanie's laptop, plus dozens more I hadn't found. Months of planning, laughing about my reactions, making bets about how long it would take me to crawl back home. "We file our response tomorrow," Patricia said, "and then we end this." The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March. I wore my best suit, the one I'd gotten married in 8 years earlier. Stephanie sat at the other table with her attorney, a sharp-dressed man who looked like he charged by the hour. She'd lost weight, looked tired. When our eyes met across the courtroom, she tried to smile, like we were still on the same team. Her attorney went first, painted me as an unstable husband who'd abandoned his wife after a minor disagreement, said I'd disappeared without warning, refused counseling, and was trying to punish Stephanie for a harmless prank. Your Honor, Mr. John Thompson was clearly looking for an excuse to leave his marriage. He used a simple misunderstanding between family members as justification for abandoning his responsibilities. Patricia stood up when it was our turn. She was calm, professional, deadly. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that contradicts the petitioner's claims. She handed the judge the stack of screenshots, the social media posts, the documented harassment. Piece by piece, she dismantled Stephanie's story. These are text messages between the petitioner and her sisters, planning what they call a prank for months in advance. Here are social media posts from the night they abandoned my client, celebrating their actions. And here are records of continued harassment after my client requested no contact. The judge reviewed the documents in silence. Stephanie's attorney whispered urgently to her, but I could see the panic in her face. Furthermore, Patricia continued, the petitioner has been spreading false claims about my client's mental state and character to mutual friends and family members. This is a pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse, not the actions of a concerned spouse. When the judge finally looked up, his expression was neutral but firm. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting the divorce as requested. Assets will be divided equally, with no spousal support awarded to either party. The court finds no evidence of abandonment or abuse by the respondent. Stephanie tried to approach me in the courthouse hallway, but Patricia stepped between us. No contact, she said firmly. The order is still in effect. I walked to my truck without looking back. 3 years after that gas station in Montana, it was finally over. The business management courses paid off. 6 months later, I started my own construction company, Thompson Contracting. Small jobs at first, bathroom renovations, deck repairs. But the work was steady, and the customers appreciated having someone who showed up on time and did what he promised. Kevin became my first employee. Then Marcus joined us when word got around that we were honest contractors who didn't cut corners. I bought a small house on the west side of Colorado Springs. Nothing fancy, but it had a garage for my tools and a yard where I could think. No shared decisions, no committee meetings about paint colors. About a year after the divorce was final, I ran into Marcus at the hardware store. You hear about Stephanie? He asked. I hadn't thought about her in months. What about her? Divorced again. Married some guy from her work 6 months after your divorce was final. Lasted about a year. I picked up the screws I'd come for and headed toward the checkout. Don't you want to know what happened? Marcus called after me. Not really, and I meant it. Stephanie and her sisters eventually faced the consequences of their actions. Jessica lost her marketing job after her harassment of me created liability issues for her company. Vanessa's attempts to spread false stories about me backfired when mutual friends compared notes and realized she was lying. Stephanie's quick remarriage and subsequent divorce damaged her reputation in our old social circle, leaving her increasingly isolated from the very people she'd tried to impress. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way.